In this REAPER update video, we're catching up on everything from 7.49 up to 7.56, which includes things like render speed improvements, changes for spectral editing, a new high-resolution spectrogram view, so much more. There's hundreds of changelog items, and I've condensed this down to 60 or 70. It'll be a long video, but I think it'll be worth your time. Let's go. And we're going to start this one off with some things that affect the appearance of REAPER. Track panels. Add context menu in empty TCP area to customize empty TCP area toolbar. Add new info block control to display contextual track information. This is optional and enabled in the theme adjuster script. Add theme elements for low pass filter, fade color, and blend mode. Right, so real quick, if you remember, there's this toolbar below all the tracks, and just clicking the plus button will add in a new track. You can now right-click this, and you have the Customize button right here. It used to be that you would have to go to another toolbar, right-click, and then Customize, and then you would find the empty TCP area toolbar and customize there. But now you can just right-click, Customize, and that works if you're clicking like around this toolbar button or below. So, same thing. And you can still double click to create a track. So they haven't changed that at all. So next I'm going to go to the options menu, themes, theme adjuster, color controls. On the track controls page, we're going to scroll down a bit and look for this use info block takes over the reordering slot of volume label. I do have the labels turned off. So just a refresher on this, we can rearrange the order of the track control panel elements. And wherever we've got this one here with the 0.0 dB label, that's the volume indicator. Currently I have all labels and values turned off, but we can turn on use info block, and that adds in a new section of the track control panel area that will be arranged by wherever this is in the track control panel order. We hover over the volume control, we see that the volume is shown. Hover over pan or width, that's shown. That updates instantly as we hover over it. It shows us the track mode, and when you have multiple tracks, it shows that on all of them. If a track is muted, it will say muted. If a track is soloed and not muted, then these other tracks will say not soloed. If we hover over the routing button, we can see that this track is routed to the master. I think that's pretty much it for that function. Again, this is optional. You have to enable this. It's not on by default. So just for comparison of the previous option here, where we've got a volume label shown and a pan and width control shown, but that's it. We don't have the muted soloed. So that's the new info block track control panel theme element, I guess you would call it. And there are new theme files that you can grab from the theme folder and modify yourself. So if you're a theme maker and you want to implement this with your own custom design, you can get those files from the default 7 theme, just extract, modify those files. I'll put the exact file names on the screen right now. So modify those or create your own to customize the info block area. All right, so I just imported a file and I'm going to add in a fade, nice big fade, and I will right-click and change this to a low-pass fade. Now I will go to the action list, search for theme tweak, show theme tweak configuration window. What we're looking for here is fade, media item, LPF, fade color. So we can now choose a different color just for when the low-pass filter fade is enabled. We could also change the blend mode. So the default is normal and 0.5 opacity, I guess. We can change this to overlay, which is super not visible, but we can set this to 1. Still kind of not very visible. We can dodge. We can add, let's do 0.75. And of course, this depends on the color of the background, what it's adding to. Just multiply and back to normal. So that's an easy thing you can customize if you don't like the default bright neon green, which I haven't saved. Well, let's just grab this color here. Actually, brighter. That looks about right. Yeah, so customizable low-pass filter fade color. Shutdown. Improve shutdown process. Display splash screen while unloading project. Better compatibility with some plugins and control surfaces. Project unload. Add option to unload projects in background on exit. Prevent UI updates while closing project. Splash screen. Display graphical progress meter while loading project. All right, so I'm just going to go to File, Open Project, and I'll just kind of grab a recent project here. And as this loads, a progress bar will appear. It still loads very quickly, as always. There's a splash screen while loading the project, which is normal, but there's also the progress bar. That is new. You're probably wondering what's up with the splash screens. We'll go to General Page, Advanced UI System Tweaks, and here we can change the theme file. You can choose any PNG file for that. I don't think you can do any animated GIFs or anything like that. But if you just clear that, that will go back to the default. Let's just open up the same project without saving. And so there's the default REAPER splash screen with the loading bar. This option here is new. Unload projects in background when quitting. If enabled, projects will be unloaded in the background on exit. REAPER may continue to use CPU and memory during this time. When you close a project in REAPER, it's now going to show the splash menu as it's unloading the project. And when you quit REAPER, you'll see that as well. It might show a little bit longer than you're used to on previous versions of REAPER. And that's because it's just displaying that while REAPER is still active and doing things, unloading the project, turning off the control surfaces, drivers, and things like that, that it's still active. Previously, and if you check this box here, unload projects in background when quitting, it was still doing stuff in the background. And if you looked at Task Manager or Activity Monitor, REAPER would still be active even though the app is not open. It's still doing stuff in the background for maybe a minute at the most. So some people are finding that it appears like projects are taking longer to close, or REAPER is not quitting instantly like it used to. All it is just it's doing a better job cleaning up all the little services or threads that were in use before and making it visible that that is happening. So with this checkbox unchecked, that's the new version, showing all that it's still active. When it is checked, that's going to be like the old behavior. So you can now choose whether that's visible or not. Preferences. Add action under Recent Project List Display button on Preferences General to remove missing projects from Recent Project List. Add user configurable list of paths to exclude when copying, moving media files. Improve UIs for configuration of alternate peaks path, allowing longer list of paths. And on Windows, use modern dialog when browsing for folders on Windows 7 and later. Let's do that last one first. I don't have the screenshot anymore, but I have it on my Blue Sky from when this first came out. So before, when you would choose your render path, your peaks folder, alternate peaks folder, you would get this ugly, terrible Windows dialog box, which has no search bar. It was just a really bad experience. It's not the normal Windows directory window. And now on Windows, you get the proper full-size window that's got the search bar, it's got the path bar, it's got all your favorites list. It's much easier to navigate. Good riddance to this browse for folder window. So I guess follow me on Blue Sky for the latest news at reaper.blog. Okay, and then the other stuff is in preferences and paths. I always use an alternate peaks cache folder, which is just my user folder temp repeaks. And I manage this using a script to automatically delete anything that's old. So whenever I record something or work in Reaper with audio, it creates peak files, they go there. I also have this set up so that when I grab something from my sample library, it will also build the peaks in there. It's not strictly necessary that you do that, but basically you can have it set up so that your peaks folders for a project stay within that project folder. And then when you move it, it doesn't need to generate new peaks. But then you can have peaks from specific folders, like your sample library, your B-roll library, stock music library. You can have a separate folder for storing the peaks from those files. And if there's no peak path created at all, Reaper would put the peaks within, like right beside each of the files that you preview from the Media Explorer or import, or if you record it into that folder. So what's new here in Reaper 7.49, I think it is the ability to add multiple paths. So I only have one here, sample library. I can click on add path and then maybe choose my movies folder. And then, yeah, so now there's just a larger list. We also have the option to not copy or move media from the following path. And we have a big list. And so I've got my, oh, it's hard to see. Now it's on screen. B-roll library, stock and assets, stock elements, lens flares, and my published videos folder. You could have this set up so that your stock sound effects or drum samples or whatever folder that you keep your stuff in, you don't want to move ever, or you don't want to copy ever to a project folder. You just have to add that path to this list, and Reaper won't copy from that folder anymore. Auto-increment. Support separate preferences for save as new version of project suffix and auto-increment file name suffix. Set default file name suffix to -001 and keep save as new version of project suffix as _001. Add preference to ensure file number comes after all existing similar named files in the directory. Add preference to treat underscore and hyphen as interchangeable when auto-incrementing file names. And allow space characters in auto-increment suffix, for example, space 001. So the auto-increment options are in preferences and general. So we've got save new version of project format, underscore, auto-increment file name format with a hyphen. You can use wildcards in here as well for project information, date and time, computer information. You can ensure auto-incremented files have higher number than all similarly named files. So if there's already a file in the render directory that starts at 003, the next file that you add there will start at 004. Otherwise, it will do 1 and 2 and then 4, that sort of thing. Treat underscore and hyphen as interchangeable when auto-incrementing, which will just prevent a file getting both the hyphen 001 and underscore 001. Just that could happen. Actions. Add action to toggle track zoom to minimum or default height, ignoring pinned tracks. Add action to bring all project effects online one at a time. Add action to open the choose project prompt and allowing opening multiple projects at once. Add actions to set all take effects online or offline based on whether the take is active or not. Add action to delete all track effects on selected tracks. So this choose projects to open action is actually the same as when you are in Preferences General and you have this set to prompt. By default would only show you this window on first startup, right? So now there is actually an option to just bring up that window whenever you want. So choose projects to open, click on run. So in addition to being able to access this anytime, you also have this option to bring effects online after load, which is pretty cool. So let me just grab that recent project there, open. And as you can see there, it was pretty quick, but each of these effects were added one at a time rather than kind of loading everything and then being able to start editing. So in a really big project with thousands of effects, you might be able to start editing a little bit quicker With a project that frequently crashes on startup, you might find that option makes it less sensitive to crashing or less likely to crash, and may also be helpful for figuring out at what stage the project crashes, as each track's effects are loaded one at a time. So let's say you have Command O for opening up this window for opening projects. And you also have this option to bring effects online after load. Maybe you could do Command Shift O. I don't have that assigned. Let's bring up that prompt. Choose projects to open. Let's add that to Command Shift O. Yeah. And now this window can be brought up, which lists new empty project, project templates, recent projects, effects. Set all effects online one at a time. So when you're opening a project, let's take this one, and we go open effects with effects offline recovery mode, it will tell me that none of the effects are online, but we can run this action, set all effects online one at a time. It's going to go through track by track, effects by effects, and start loading these effects. There we go. It's pretty common for your recent projects list to be sort of out of date with which things are actually on your computer still. I don't know for sure if I do have anything that's missing right now, but if I did, I could go here to the Preferences General Recent Projects List Display. And in here, I can click on Remove Missing Projects from File. And it's just going to reference that list and see if it's still on the hard drive. So I'm going to click that. And there's no indicator of anything happening really, but this list will get smaller and remove any of the things that aren't existing anymore. So if you work on a lot of temp projects and then delete them or you move them, REAPER doesn't know how to navigate those files that aren't where it saved last. So you can now clear that instantly. So you're not going to have those files that don't exist in that recent file list. Actions to toggle zoom. Toggle track zoom to default height, ignore pinned tracks. And so that goes like this. And we could also toggle this to minimum height. Let's take these couple tracks here. We'll pin them to the top of the arrange. If I toggle to minimum height, only the tracks that are not pinned get resized. But otherwise, let's go to this one that does all tracks at once. Yeah, if you don't use pinned tracks, it's kind of irrelevant which one you use, but that new option is there should you need it. Fixed lanes. Add action to play only most recently playing lane for A/B comparison. All right, so that's going to be actions, track lanes, play only most recently playing lane, and we have this also for track under mouse. That can only work from a shortcut. So this track, I just click on 3 and then click on run here. Oops, click on run here. It'll toggle back and forth between comp 1 and lane 3. Or if I manually click on 2, toggle that, it will go back and forth between the two. So it kind of remembers the last one you used, and that can be a good way to A/B compare. I only have 2 layers in most of these tracks, but yeah, you kind of get the idea. You can quickly A/B compare 2 different things without having to manually click these, moving the mouse. Just a toggle to switch back and forth between the last 2 things that played. Action to delete all effects on selected track. Effects. Delete all track effects on selected tracks. Yeah, pretty simple. You can always undo that. The previous way of doing this was with the SWS extension, clear effects chain for selected tracks, or the alternative was to alt-click on the effects button here, and that will do the same thing. Just undo. Metronome, support setting to half speed. Click source, support following project tempo, time signature while customizing click pattern. support setting to half speed. All right, so we'll open up the metronome window. We obviously will enable this, click pattern. We can now set this to 0.5. So let's just start off with a 120 click. And if we want a half-time click, simply set this to 0.5. Sounds like this. It'll just be 2 clicks on the half notes. Pretty simple. And if you didn't know already, we also have double, which is hitting on the 8th notes. And we have the same thing for the click source. So insert click source. This is a metronome item, essentially. And we're going to go to source properties, and we can customize this. And it's pretty much the same as that previous window we saw. We can make this follow the project tempo and time signature changes. Of course we would, but we can also override that. And also override whatever the default settings are. So we can follow whatever the project is set to, or per item customize it. Crossfade editor. Support previewing inbounds audio only, out of bounds audio only, top lane only, bottom lane only. Add option to allow hand scroll on ruler with no auto center or recenter. Add setting to allow left and right items to be on a different track or lanes. Support mouse editing pre-roll and post-roll directly. Support scrubbing audio. So I've got a couple of items here. They are overlapped and crossfading. And then I open it up in the crossfade editor by double-clicking on the crossfade. So the top portion is basically a duplicate of this, showing both waveforms. Then this item here is the first side, and the second part is the second side. And there is more audio of each part before and after. Now what's new in the crossfade editor is options to listen to inbounds only, so that's within the crossfade section, plus pre and post roll. We've got out of bounds only, so that's only going to play before and after. Then we've got top lane only, or the left side of the fade, and then bottom lane only, and that's the right side of the fade. And those two options are very similar to muting the left side or muting the right side, but they can be used in combination. So you can, if you mute the left side and then play top lane only, it'll sound like this. And bottom lane only, or all together, or soloed. So when it's soloed, you don't hear whatever is playing on track 2, which is just a drone. It's pre and post roll can be adjusted directly by dragging here. Yeah, these controls are linked, but you can type in the amount. We go here to the options. We can link pre and post roll when mouse editing or turn that off. So now each one is independent. So hand scrolling in the ruler is disabled by default, but we can enable that in options. It's a little hard to keep everything on screen when this menu pops downward, but allow hand scroll on ruler. So grabbing this allows you to move it around without it automatically recentering. Allow left and right media items to be on different tracks. That's an interesting one. Yeah, so if you enable that, you can do this, where you just select them and you can edit the overlapping areas on these 2 tracks. That's kind of a neat thing. There's certainly times where you would want each one of them to have its own track for its own effects change or maybe routing, but typically if I'm working on something that needs to be carefully crossfaded, it's going to be within one track. But it is nice to know you can, if they're overlapping on different tracks and you select them, you can actually edit that crossfade within the crossfade editor. And scrubbing audio, so that's just grabbing the play cursor here. So that's all great stuff added to the crossfade editor. FX. Allow rename of wet bypass delta parameters. Improve loading speed of projects that have many per-take effects. Add preference to control whether pin mappings are loaded when loading effects presets. Effects browser. A change in VST path does not change folder membership. Let's start off with the effects browser changes. So within the effects browser, there's all the different VST paths, which are preferences VST. So we've got the VST paths. Now, if you move something from one folder to another within the path directory, and they were in folders within REAPER's organization of the effects browser, it used to be that changing where it was located on the hard drive would remove it from a folder within REAPER's effects browser. So now that doesn't happen. I don't know what the mechanism is for how they're detecting that something has changed, or it's the same thing but in a different folder. But anyways, it's not going to be removed anymore. Preserve pin mappings when loading presets. Affects pin indicator or pin connector options. That's this button up here. It preserves all these settings, whether it's saved with the effects presets. So I'm going to keep this unchecked for now. And I will change these so that there's no sidechain input. And I'll move that parameter. And then I will save this as an example. Okay, and I can go to some other preset, and I click here, and it's changed that effects pin mapping based on that preset. So this preset loads it with this configuration, while every other preset loads with the default configuration. So if we click on Preserve Pin Mappings when loading presets, and then load my example, it stayed on the default, or whatever configuration was there before I toggled that switch. It's probably not something that you're going to be switching a lot, but essentially just think of it as, do I want my plugin pin mapping to be saved with the presets or not? With preserve checked, that means do not save it with the effects. I think it's saved technically, but it doesn't load unless this is off. Yeah, if you want your pin mapping to stay the same every time, regardless of what preset you load, preserve pin mappings when loading presets needs to be on. In my mind, it's kind of backwards. And the other thing I'll show here for effects is you can now change the name of the wet-dry control and the bypass control when they're shown as envelopes or track controls. Let's just add those as envelopes or track controls. Yeah, let's do a track control for that as well. So show track controls, and I've got my bypass button there. Parameter, the last touch thing, we can choose alias parameter. It brings up a naming window. Let's call this coffee. And now if we zoom in here, we've got coffee control on or off. And we've got coffee. And then let's take that wet dry control. I'll show you another way to rename this. So from the menu, we can find alias parameter. Same window pops up. We'll just call this T. And so that renames it there. You know, those functions are not really new. It's just that they're now allowed to be changed on the wet dry control for any plugin or the bypass toggle for any plugin. And also the delta solo function is also now able to be aliased, renamed. Region Marker Manager. Add current column to display where the play or edit cursor currently is. Support current column for take markers. So, yeah, Region Marker Manager now has a column for current. So where the edit cursor or play cursor is as it passes along the timeline, this will have a little dash in there displaying where it's currently located. So if I go past the first marker, we'll see the current thing has a little dot there. If I go past the marker number 2, that will move down to there. If I'm within a region, it'll be there. So I'm within the region, and also I'm past marker number 2. If I go over to where my first take marker is, we'll see that it's currently within a region, past marker number 2, and there's a take marker on this item. And then come over here to the end, and now I'm no longer within the region, so the region is not highlighted, and I'm at this marker, and I'm past another marker on the take. And now if I click over to the end, past the item, past all the markers, only marker number 3 is in the current column. Import. Add action to insert all media items in directory. Add setting and preference to create folder tracks for imported directories. Recursively import files from subdirectories when dragging a directory into REAPER. Warn or verify when importing more than 1,000 files at once. Import media files from directory. And so here I can just choose a folder, so REAPER media. And let's put them sequential time positions on a single track. And now I've just loaded up a whole bunch of files there. A couple hours worth, looks like. So obviously this function here is different than insert media file, which is looking for a single file, where this was looking for everything within a particular folder. Let's delete that. Let's go to import media files from directory. Now let's go to my sample library. And let's go to general sound effects and fully interact. This one has a folder inside of it. When choosing same time position on separate tracks, that also gives you create folder tracks for imported directories. Let's also do recursively import files from subdirectories. So that put it into a folder and it collapsed it automatically. But yeah, here we've got all kinds of things. And then the metal boxes folder also got its own folder. Let me find that. So my general sound effects folder here has a metal boxes folder, and that became a folder within REAPER. And so each of these separate media files ended up on separate tracks, and the same with the other one. So it only imported audio files. I did have a image file here, but that did not import with it, which I think is fine. I don't think that's an expected thing to happen. So for that import thing, media import, there is a preference to choose whether that is on or off by default. So media import when importing multiple media items, I had it on prompt, but if you just choose insert on separate tracks or decide automatically, if we just do separate tracks, it unlocks these two options here to create folder tracks for imported directories or to recursively import from subdirectories. Maybe you want to have everything except for subfolders imported, or maybe you want to import things without creating folder tracks. You have those options when you're importing on separate tracks. But it's a single track only. You don't get the option for folder tracks. And decide automatically, it does have that option. I'm going to put this back on prompt because I just like to choose depending on what I'm doing. Since I have this folder open, let's grab something else. Let's find something that has a lot of different files. That's 103, 831. Let's just take like all of these folders and drop them into the project. And here's that warning for over 1,000 files. So I will choose no in this case. I just wanted to show you what that looks like. Media Explorer. Set default fade in, out to 20 milliseconds. Support either fade in or fade out or both or neither for preview audio, which replaces the option to crossfade. All right, opening up the Media Explorer, there's a few new options in here for crossfading. So options, fade in, fade out settings, fade in on play, fade out on stop, fade on pause or unpause. And then we can choose how long. So it said the default was 20 milliseconds, but mine was off here, or mine was set to 0. Let's choose 250 milliseconds, something long, and actually notice it. All right, so I'm gonna show this fade in, fade out stuff with a couple different types of source. A very long file. So there's a short fade in, fade out period when I press play and stop. Now I'm going to right click, go to options, fade in out settings, turn these off, and play again. So just instantly start and stop. I'm going to go over to a different folder here, my synth drums, and I'll just play this first one. Very sharp attack. Very intense impact at the start. And that's with fades off. But I'm going to go to fade in and out settings, turn fade in and out on, and set to 250 milliseconds. Play it again. It really softens that impact, and probably not in a good way. And let's even set this to the default of 20 milliseconds. Even that has softened the impact quite a lot as well. So I would just be careful of that. We can customize this stuff. There are actions for these functions. You can add those to the toolbar to turn on fade in and out. So actually, let's just customize that right now. Customize toolbar, and we'll go to this and fade preview audio, select and close. That's at the end of the list. I guess that icon. Apply. So fade in is on. Fade in is off. If that's something that you'll be using, it's probably not something you want to use every time. So having a customized toolbar button is going to be really helpful. Spectrogram. Add high-resolution spectrogram view. When sufficiently zoomed in, the zoom threshold is configured in Preferences. Add mouse wheel, MIDI, CC, OSC assignable actions to adjust brightness, contrast curve, frequency curve. Spectral edits. Add action to bypass, solo, delete selected spectral edits, reset or adjust gain of edit. Add new preferences page to configure defaults for new spectral edits. Control clicking an edit allows multiple selection of edits. Faster drawing updates when modifying edits. And improved selection behavior, deselect spectral edits in other items when selecting, etc. All right, so I imported the sound of a shotgun pump, and I have Spectrogram view enabled from the Peaks display settings. In the additional options here, we've got the option of high resolution spectrogram when zoomed in. And it looks like that, significantly more clear. Let's also zoom in my screen. Significantly more clear. And as always, we can still adjust all the various settings, change the color scheme of this, whatever suits your eyesight the best. That actually looks quite clear to me. And I know that there's some low frequency stuff here at the bottom. So I'll add in a spectral edit to the item. Let's trim that down, and let's turn the gain down on that. And let's fade that upward, kind of. And also to the right. So that can just be a good way to kind of get rid of some of the background noise in sort of a subtle way. So let's do something like that. So there I was just holding the command key and dragging along the edge. So it's affecting more of the high frequencies as the track goes on. And this can still work with a fade out. It'll look like. If we search for Spectrogram and CC, that allows us to assign mouse wheel, a MIDI controller, or an OSC controller to the brightness, the color curve, the contrast, the frequency log scaling. Yeah, so I just assigned it to a MIDI controller there. Okay, it looks like it only works when the window is open. So That's interesting. Yeah, may be helpful. I'm not sure why that was requested or decided to be added. Now for the spectral edit actions, the new ones, there is adjust gain of selected spectral edits by 0.5, minus 19, minus 17. Yeah, so that's working. Move it by +3 at a time. And we can bypass the edit. We can delete the edit. We can reset the gain of the edit. We can solo that edit. You can see the edit menu, have that pop up wherever you want. Right, so you could add these to a toolbar or a MIDI controller, keyboard shortcuts, whatever you like. If you work a lot with spectral edits, that's going to save you quite a lot of time. When we have 2 or more spectral edits, we can use the Command key on Mac or Control key on Windows to multi-select them. And then those shortcuts actually work together. So we can do adjust gain of selected by -3. And that's doing it to both of those spectral edits. We can bypass, we can delete, we can reset the gain, and we can solo those. Solo will basically mute everything outside of that area. In terms of frequency, not time. So, great additions to spectral editing. Hey, I almost forgot to talk about the preference page for spectral edits. This is all new. So you can preset all the settings that you would want as a starting point for spectral edits. So let's say 25% fade in, 25% fade out. Let's do maybe 10% fade for low frequencies and 50% for high frequencies. Let's set the gain to -15. I don't tend to use the compression or gate functions, really, and the default FFT size of 1024 generally works pretty well, so I'll just leave it at that. So now, when I make a time selection, and then add a spectral edit to it, it's going to start off at -15, and it's going to have a bit of a fade, and that's just a big time saver. I really like that. So that's a really important change to know about because that's going to save you so much time. Wildcards. Support item notes name. Support CHID channel ID for use when rendering stereo multi-channel to mono files, ignored otherwise. Support CHID N to name channels when exploding N channel file, ignore for other channel counts. Support project notes and project notes key to display specific lines from project notes. See wildcard help for more information. Go to item settings and item notes. We can give this some titles like that. So shotgun pump can be added there. And then in the render window, let's do selected media items. And for the file name, we'll do item notes. And we got the word shotgun pump into the file name. Let's add an underscore $CHID. And in the post-processing, I've got this render each channel to separate mono file. And with that is enabled, we see here that channels 1 and 2 get exported as separate files. So left channel, right channel as separate files. With that off, it will just be the stereo file. With the set to mono, it would be sum to mono, and we wouldn't get 2 separate files. Set to mono and post-process on would still be mono. So this has to be on stereo or 4 channels, 3 channels, whatever. CHID, curly bracket, N, curly bracket, close, regular bracket, left, comma, right, regular bracket, close, parenthesis. So we can name the channels that way. If we look over at project settings on the notes page, we can have title and author and some notes here. And specific things can be added to the render file names. So let's say gun sounds, author is reaper.blog, and this is project notes. So if we use $project notes, we get the notes here, media, this is project notes. So in the wildcard help, it's giving you some information for like project information. And the nice thing is that it automatically fills in with information from this particular project. So for title, we've got gun sounds, because that's the title of the project from the notes dialog. Author, Reaper blog. And then project notes is the notes from the note. So I showed that already here with project notes. So this is project notes. But then that other section with project notes name is a little more complicated because it matches the values. So you'd have to have something like first equals John, and then that information can be added into the wildcards. So let's do project notes coffee. Currently, there's no information called coffee in the project notes. Let's just save settings so we don't lose anything. Open up project settings. So we'll do coffee equals great. Tea equals almost as good. Okay? How do we do this? Coffee, comma, space, $ project notes, bracket, no, not name, tea, bracket. There we go. Great, almost as good. So based on this, you can figure out a system that automatically fills in this information. You develop your own system for using this. So you're kind of defining your own metadata tags by using the item, the project notes setup. So coffee equals great allows you to put the word great automatically into your file names. Apply that to real world use as your needs dictate. I had to consult the wildcard help for this information to figure this out, to even remotely explain it to you. So just so you know, this information is there. It goes through all of this. Let's move on from wildcards for now. Big clock. Support parent POS wildcard to display parent project time for subprojects if unambiguous. Support time and beats as shorthand time formats for wildcards like project POS format. Support region POS and marker POS wildcards. Time with current region, time since last marker. I said we're moving on from wildcards, but we're instantly back into wildcards. So let's go over to Big Clock Plus, double click to show the settings. So we've got project POS, but we can also have this project POS bracket time, and that will show the time. You can set this to beats, and now it's bars and beats. So there's sort of a shorthand for that. This can also be $parent POS. If this was a sub-project, that would display the current time position from its parent project if they're both playing simultaneously. Because a sub-project doesn't necessarily have to start at 0 in the parent project. So that can be useful. Let me put a region here. This region does not start at 0. Let's do the default of project position time and region POS time. Let's move this up to here. So time within the project and then time within the region is where the edit cursor is. And the other one is, let's remove the marker one. So marker name, the nearest marker was, there is no markers in the project. Put a marker there. There's a marker, it's unnamed, but let's do this $marker POS time. And so the time since the last marker is shown there. All of this is completely optional. but can be useful in certain situations. And again, there's a wildcard help function in here that will explain all of this stuff. I think at this point, anything you can think of to display from the big clock can be done using the wildcards available now. There's so much you can display here and hide them and reorder them as needed. Render. If no directory is displayed in the render dialog directory field, browsing for directory initializes the directory that would be rendered to by default rather than the most recent used directory. Add render setting to disable parallel post-processing. Support rendering stereo and multi-channel to per-channel mono files via post-processing dialog. Disable second pass render option when normalizing video render. Improve render speed when rendering many files and using effects that introduce latency. Improve render speed when rendering many very short files. All right, coming back to the render dialog again. A bunch of new options. I did already show this before, but there is that option to render separate mono files, stereo, multi-channel, or multi-channel only. So great for rendering out 5.1 files, 4-channel files, or separate mono files right from the render window. So there's no post-processing manually that you would have to do. It used to be that if you rendered out a stereo file, but you wanted a left and right, a multi-mono file or pair of files, you would then have to open up the batch processor and export them as explode the channels, which didn't take long, but it can now be done completely automated while rendering. When you're rendering out stem tracks, and let's just duplicate a bunch of tracks and select all. If we're doing selected tracks via master, we have a bunch of tracks selected. We have this option of doing a parallel render, which has its own help page, but basically it's just to improve the render speed. When rendering multiple tracks simultaneously, this is going to be enabled by default because it's just generally the faster option. It doesn't sound any different, but it's just faster. Like when set to master mix, it's on. When set to region render matrix, it's on. When doing razor edit areas, it's on. Everything except for the via master option, where you have the option of turning that on or off. Parallel render via master requires invisibly duplicating project effects during the render process. If the project is resource constrained, or if some plugins require a long time to load, then parallel render via master may take a long time, or incorrectly render silences for some files. Enabling delay render start to give effects time to initialize or load samples if needed. If you enable parallel render via master, be sure to verify that all files render as expected. So by rendering everything simultaneously with multiple threads, it greatly speeds up the render process. It's not always the best option if you have a bunch of tracks that are going through master track effects, right? If there's just tracks you're rendering at the track level, it can process those very quickly by doing it in parallel. But if you're doing multiple tracks via master, you basically have to duplicate the master to get each track to go through that master simultaneously. So parallel render essentially is doing that. It's kind of duplicating the project to run multiples through at a time. But then by doing that, you might need this delay render start option to be enabled, which will add a delay and maybe negate the parallel render speed somewhat, but probably only for the first render. After that, it'll be faster. So it's definitely an interesting option. You may not even notice the speed increase until you're up into hundreds, thousands of files. And again, that's another feature that they added in this, just sort of like redundant processes when you're dealing with many hundreds of files, where over time those renders get slower and slower because there's sort of like a cleanup process or something like that that hasn't been optimized. If you're only doing like one render a day, you're not going to notice this. If you're rendering 1,000 files a day, you might notice a speed increase in REAPER 7.56. We're almost done. Now some sort of honorable mentions. Control surfaces. Add SoftTube Console 1 support. Portable. When running a portable install for the first time, prompt user whether to scan VST clap VL2 plugin paths. Automation items. Add project setting to choose whether beats, position only, time-based changes length of automation items, which is on by default, which matches behavior of 7.49 and earlier. macOS, allow plugins to request access to system cameras. Allow plugins to request access to speech framework for speech recognition. So I don't have a Softtube Console 1 control surface, but I can show you where that would be added. So you go to Add, and then in this list, we now have Console 1 Mark III as one of the available options. I can't really show you, but yeah, it's a collaboration between the Reaper devs and Softtube to get great integration with the Console 1. At least for Mark III is what's listed, but maybe 1 and 2 are also good. That control surface is also compatible through Control Surface Integrator and other extensions, but now there's a native control surface mode as well. So which is nice to see. The speech recognition was requested by a one of the forum users that was developing a script. So this would allow Reaper to be like controlled by voice, and also for speech transcription to enable editing. There's already a script made that uses this function to transcribe audio into project markers, which is pretty cool. This is a Mac-only feature, but for the people that are looking for like sort of AI tools, this is, a start towards that. For the camera support, I haven't seen a use case for that yet. I know people had wanted to record video directly into Reaper, but I'm not going to say that that is what this is for yet. It may be for motion tracking. It may be for like ADR lip sync. At least like the door is open towards possibilities for that. I guess without building new frameworks that are Reaper specific, it can tap into stuff that is already available on the Mac. I asked about it on the forum. I didn't get a reply, so I don't really know what's all involved in that. It's definitely not for spying on us. I can assure you that. But yeah, script makers may be able to use the camera for something, at least on macOS. That might be really interesting. For projects, settings, there's the option of the time base beats position only affecting automation item length. So this is now optional. When that's on, it's kind of like how Reaper always was, but there was, 2 weeks or something where that was different. So automation items can kind of have their own time base now, separate from the project, which is kind of interesting. All right, we made it through. That's so many items. This is probably one of the longer changelog videos. Each update on its own didn't really feel right to do a video on, but now altogether the last so many updates, this is now a long video. There's a lot to cover. So hopefully you made it through unharmed. I'm on my second coffee, and I'm definitely going to need a third to even start the editing. Yeah, if you missed any of the previous changelog videos, there'll be a link to the playlist down below, going all the way back to 5.0. There's so many good tips and tricks and features you've probably forgotten about. Check out that full playlist. You can support the Reaper blog on Patreon or YouTube channel members. Follow me on Blue Sky or Facebook, or just visit the Reaper blog for more tutorials. See you guys later.